tuned to the Witching Hours on CKCU 93.1 FM in Ottawa. It is me, your host, Kanaska Carter, every single late Monday night, early Tuesday morning. You get to hang out with me for 5 hours while we talk about the paranormal, extraterrestrial, and alien life, the afterlife, and sometimes you get into politics. So much more, many more topics tonight on the show. I am interviewing a former guest, actually, David J.W., who is the author of Apocalypse Chow. How are you doing over there?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on the program again. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, for
nice
sure.
To be here.
I think if my memory serves me correctly, last time you were on the show, your book hadn't been released yet?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I put it out in the summertime, and yeah, I mean, it's been a bit of a gas. It doesn't deal with the paranormal, so I hope that your listeners don't mind.
For sure. So what is the book about, if you could just let us know?
Well, it's called Apocalypse Chow, so it takes the part of the story of Apocalypse Now and the story structure of Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. Okay. So they're a really super famous book and a really well-known movie, and I sort of mashed them together. But my story takes place in the restaurant trade in Northern Ontario.
Okay.
So the main character, Charlie Marlowe, is a sort of a restaurant manager for hire, and he takes on a job to go into the hinterlands of Northern Ontario to track down Chef Kurtz, who has gone rogue in a restaurant in the middle of nowhere, a restaurant called Chow.
Okay.
So it's a bit of a lark.
So gone rogue, what does that mean? Like he's gone completely crazy and lost his mind?
Yeah. So like in the original Heart of Darkness, it takes place in the Belgian Congo. A real horror story of a place. And the character of Marlowe is an ivory trader and a station manager in the middle of nowhere up the Congo River. And of course, in the Apocalypse Now, the character of Kurtz is played by Marlon Brando, and he's an American officer who's gone into the jungles and sort of turned rogue, turned into like this cultish figure in the middle of the jungle. So those two source materials are pretty rich and well known, and I've been working in trade for a long time. Thankfully, I'm out of it now, but this is something that had percolated in my mind for years, so I finally sat down and wrote it.
So what inspired you to write this book?
It was partly the fine dining scene in Toronto, actually. I was working in Toronto in the late 90s, early 2000s. It's where I cut my teeth in the trade, and it was a world that kind of lent itself to the sort of chaotic mindset of Apocalypse Now. In 2001, Francis Ford Coppola re-released the film with an extra almost hour of footage. It was called Apocalypse Now Redux, and that sort of inspired me. I read the book. I hadn't read Heart of Darkness in high school, so I read the book, and I sort of, I kind of put things together in my mind. It wasn't until 2011 that I wrote it, and it wasn't until just now that I published it for various reasons. But yeah,
it takes time. Right?
Yeah, these things do really take time, and life gets in the way. And as you're a writer, I mean, how.
Yeah.
Like you can have all these ideas and all this inspiration, then a lot of it has to do with, sort of hard work and discipline and
feeling motivated. Some days I don't feel motivated to write. Like,
sure.
Like the first book I ever wrote took 10 years to publish. The next one took a month. Next one took 2 weeks. So eventually you start to learn how to do it faster, I find, or some books just take time in general, like depending the type of book that you want to write. So, is there a moral behind this story that you're trying to get out to the world?
Part of it is humorous. I mean, it is a parody, so there is a certain amount of like kind of making fun, not just of the original source material, but of the industry itself. Like, like the hospitality, the restaurant industry, especially in fine dining, takes itself way too seriously. So there is something really fun about sort of poking fun at that. So there is humor, but at the same time, it's also kind of serious as well. I mean, like I take on issues around like food security, and like sort of the characters discuss the issues around like what people having access to food and essentially poverty and starvation. And then I also like look at issues around local foods that are found in Ontario, which are sort of underutilized. On the one hand, they're not really well known, outside of Aboriginal communities, and then on the other hand, a lot of that land is now actually threatened by pollution, and it's what I didn't actually put it in the book. It's something that I think I probably should have, but there's a lot of mining and a lot of resource extraction in northern Ontario, and so there's massive amounts of watersheds that have been sort of poisoned in one form or another. So it's really kind of problematic, actually.
What do you think are the?
So yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm listening. Sorry.
No, just sort of like, so there's the humor, and then I think there's also there's more serious aspect of it as well. There's a bit of a mental health issues that are covered. I also deal with drug addiction. Actually, there's a scene where one of the characters is having withdrawal from opiates.
Okay.
And one of the other characters actually treats him with Ibogaine.
I was just going to bring that up. I was just going to say, have you heard of Ibogaine?
Yeah. Well, actually, I decided to put in a scene in which one of the characters is actually treated with Ibogaine. Mm-hmm. I'm a big believer in it. I'm a big believer in sort of alternative viewpoints around psychedelic drugs. And certainly Ibogaine is a potent tool that has proven time and again to be a very effective treatment for opioid addiction. But of course, it's not something that can be patented. So
yes,
pharmacologically it works, but for the pharmaceutical industry, it's anathema. They'd rather keep people on methadone, which is, as any heroin addict will tell you, is worse than heroin.
Yeah, exactly. My friend, I
don't have any personal experience with that, but
no, me neither. I've never been involved with opiates in any way, but I have tried psychedelics in the past. My friend, he's a DJ, and he just released an album called Ibogaine. I believe it was.
Wow.
Yeah, he called it Ibogaine. And basically, he's just trying to get the word out. And it's supposed to take place in the future where he's a DJ peddling Ibogaine and the cops are after him. So essentially, it's just like there's all these cures that they don't want to tell people about. And all of them are mostly natural. So it's like...
Yeah. We do have a slight advantage here in Canada that Ibogaine is legal.
Oh, is it? Great.
But... Yes, it is, but it's really, really expensive in terms of treatment. Like, if there's a treatment program in Toronto, but it's $5,000 a session.
Wow.
Like, who has that kind of money?
That? That's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous, and in fact, it's really unfair. I mean, the people will fly down to places like Panama. Panama's actually really been sort of a pioneering locale for this sort of treatment. Other places as well, and so flying down there and having that treatment. A lot of people talk about doing ayahuasca retreats. I mean, I'm not going to bash people for going on those sorts of things, but we should actually be looking at people who have real problems in terms of addiction. And ayahuasca is all that great. You have the money to go down to Peru and have an ayahuasca experience. Good for you, but you're somebody on the street who doesn't, or people who are suffering from opioid addictions just don't have that kind of access. And I think we owe it actually to our society and to people who are less fortunate in society to actually have access to that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. In the United States, we were just talking about this on the last show. I had a guest on, and her son had passed away because he couldn't afford his insulin, and he was rationing his insulin in the United States. So luckily up in Canada, we don't really have to deal with that too much. But when I see something like this where you're saying it's $5,000, it's basically the same thing.
It's insane. I mean, that's just an example in Toronto. I mean, there are practitioners in British Columbia that are a lot more fair in terms of their access. I mean, I think they do actually make it available for a much lower cost. But, it is. I mean, the United States, I think part of our problem is that we live so close to the U.S. and we have, like it or not, Canadians have there's a certain puritanical bent that Canadians have, which is not all that dissimilar to our American cousins. And there's progress that's being made in the U.S. to a certain extent because the situation there is so much worse. Like today or yesterday, the Massachusetts Attorney General pointed the finger at Purdue Pharma, the Sadler Group there's a family actually. It's just like a billionaire family that own Purdue Pharmaceuticals, and they're the ones who created OxyContin. And basically, eventually, like, we should see lawsuits against these kinds of people to say, look, you're responsible. 400,000 deaths in the United States since the late 1990s around opioids.
Really? That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's just shocking, right? I mean,
I've had friends
but
die from that before.
and here in Canada, actually, we don't have the same numbers, but I think it's something like 3 a day in Ontario. I think it is. I don't know what the numbers are like in BC.
I know
And then we have, of
Vancouver's
course,
crazy.
Doug Ford, who one of his first things was to shut down, any talk of the kind of treatments that are actually being shown to work in communities when it comes to safe injection sites and needle exchanges and that kind of stuff. The work that's being done is being shut down by the Ford government. They don't give a flying fuck about people, right?
No, they really don't. Like right now, we're trying to levy against the Ontario government and the university, Carleton University, just to prove how important radio is and having free access to this equipment, So there's over $1 billion worth of cuts to universities and colleges. It's insane.
Yeah. But you know what they're going to have money for? What's going to come down the pike eventually? That the Ford government will announce that they're going to go ahead with the $1 billion new jail in Ottawa. That's what they're going to announce. And maybe this year, maybe next year, they're going to announce that, because there's been huge plans around OCDC, the Ottawa Correctional Detention, or the Ottawa Center Detention Center, Ottawa Carleton Detention Center. Sorry. And they're looking at building a new jail, and that's going to cost $1 billion.
Oh.
That's I'm actually involved with a project out of that's jointly shared between Carleton and U of O, called the Criminalization and Punishment Education Project, CPEP. It's run by Aaron Doyle, and who's a professor at U of O, and Justin Pichet, who's an associate professor at Carleton. And along with a number of others, there's academics, there's graduate students, PhD students, and then there's people like myself, actually, who've had experience with incarceration. And when you look at what's going on at OCDC, it's actually outrageous. I mean, people are dying there. We had a death actually only a week or two ago, a hanging, like someone who died by suicide. There was just recently an inquiry into another death of a schizophrenic man who was being held at OCDC because there were no beds at the Royal Ottawa Hospital. So as you mentioned, like, they want to take away $1 billion from the cuts to universities. Well, where are they going to take that money? They're going to put it into building jails, right?
That's terrible.
So it's like, right? So no money for students, no money for upkeep of facilities, but money for jails, right? Like, we know what they want to do to us.
But can't they get profit from jails?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Actually, on Wednesday, there's actually a demonstration coming up around Bell, because Bell charges something like $25 for a 20-minute long-distance call from OCDC. If you're an inmate of OCDC, you pay something like $3 a minute if you're making local calls. And that's Bell. I mean, that's, they're doing this Let's Talk campaign around mental health. And they're profiting from mental health, like inmates who are suffering from mental health in OCDC. Right?
So what do you think
this
needs
is the corporate
to change?
sector profiting from mental health and from prisoners.
How would you like to see things change when it comes to getting the type of prescription medications that people need?
Well, the first thing we have to recognize is that when we socialize gains, or privatize gains and socialize losses, we have a huge problem. I mean, when we have a society that's based on, winner take all, whether it's in the corporate world or frankly in electoral politics as well, right? We don't have proportional representation. We don't have a true democracy. Doug Ford won with like 37% of the vote. I mean, and like, I worked on Joel Harden's campaign, who was the MPP candidate for the NDP here in Ottawa Centre, an old friend of Joel's, and I believed in his campaign. I wouldn't ordinarily get involved in that in helping on a campaign, but I did it because I was I'm really confident in Joel and who he is as a progressive, as a Democrat, and as a socialist, frankly, and so. When you look at the issues around putting people before profit, I think that's where we have to start from, actually. We have to start by saying, look, when the CEO of Loblaws, Galen Weston Jr., says that he can't afford $150, $200 million to pay $15 an hour for his workers when he's making $32,000 an hour and his family's worth $8-9 billion, right? But they cannot afford to pay $15 an hour. That is outrageous. It is disgusting. Like, our society as a whole cannot continue to function long term with that kind of disparity. And we associate Canada with being one of the best countries in the world. Like, frankly, we are a lot better off than other places, but that actually suggests to me that we should be struggling even more to maintain and improve our situation, right? If we just say, well, we're better off than other places, then, well, we don't notice as pot gets slowly hotter and hotter while we sit inside of it. You know?
Yeah, you don't really notice until it hits you directly. Like with all the cuts, it didn't really affect me directly until I read my email saying that we're going to have to lobby to try to get the radio station going. And then I was like, okay, this is out of control now. It's affecting a lot of people. So do you have any plans to write any new books?
Yes, yeah, definitely. I have too many ideas. Not too many. I have more ideas than I have time and discipline. I'm working on a number of different projects. I actually have an experience with incarceration. I was locked up partly out of the work that I was doing as an activist and journalist when I was living in southern Africa. I lived in a country called Zambia. I was born there. It's a long story, but while I was inside, I was held for 4 months while I was going through trial. I was acquitted in November of 2017, locked up July 13th, 2017, and acquitted and released on the 8th of November 2017. And while I was inside, I actually wrote a novel. I wrote the first draft of a novel.
Nice.
And a bunch of other stuff. And so I'm going through the torturous process of editing that work. And then I'm working on new material. I'm sort of constantly inspired to do new work. In fact, actually, about the closest I can get to paranormal is actually to talk about tarot and oracle cards, which is something that I really find increasingly interesting. A very surprising discovery for me. My partner is someone who's really interested in oracle cards, and she sort of got me into it. And I've always sort of enjoyed having tarot readings and oracle card readings. I've always kind of enjoyed that, but I've never really taken it a lot seriously. But I actually have really gotten into it lately.
Yeah, I used to read for 14 years.
Amazing. Now, did you read tarot?
I read tarot, yeah. Since I was 13 years old, but the last reading I did, I predicted my friend's death. But it had nothing to do with the cards. I just said, you need to move your camping spot. There's a negative spirit camping here. You need to move. And they were like, oh, no, everything's fine. They pulled the death card. And so 1 week later, lightning hit that spot and killed my friend. But I've always been able to predict things, even without the cards, since I was young. But then I just stopped doing tarot after that. Even though it had nothing to do with the cards, my cards were damaged, and it just felt like it was time after 14 years of doing it, But there is truth to it in a way. Personally, for me, I started to see that if you say to someone, okay, this is going to happen, they in turn start to believe it and they manifest it. But then there's also the other side to it where they're the ones choosing the cards, so they're choosing their own destiny in a way. You know what I mean? So
I do. Yeah. Especially with the idea of manifesting. You can manifest positive and negative. I think that's really true.
Yes. So I started to kind of just realize you can help and heal people without the cards just by focusing on what it is you want to manifest in your own life. Because say you pick up a card and it's something negative, you're going to be thinking about that. And it's going to be festering inside of you. You know what I mean? So I just started to see how much I was influencing other people's lives. And then one day I was high on mushrooms and I was sitting in my vendor's tent. I was like a psychic at festivals, right? I would just do that before I did tattoos. And I was like, I don't believe this anymore. And then so I just tried to do a reading for my friend without the cards, and it was spot on. So regardless of whether or not you have the cards, we all have the ability within us to have psychic abilities regardless, is what I came to realize.
I think the most important thing is to not like purposely deceive people. I think intention is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, like I'm a huge fan of like James Randi. I don't know if you're familiar with James Randi. He's a conjurer. He calls himself a conjurer. But really what he's done, he's made a career out of like pointing out how other people actually are doing fakery, really,
cold readings
and fraud.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, he's a really fascinating guy. He's Canadian, but he became really famous when he went down to the States. And anyway, James Randi, I highly recommend people check him out. I mean, he's had for something like 2 to 3 decades. He's had this $1 million challenge where he's like, here, come and do this test, and you can prove me wrong. No one's ever taken him up on it, or people have taken him up on it. But he still has the money.
That's interesting.
So like I think intention is everything. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like so someone can sit down and do a reading, and it's like that's perfectly cool. But if somebody wants to turn around and say, "Well, give me $1,000 and I'll channel your dead relative," then I'm like, no,
that's fake.
No.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Yeah, no, I just did it to help people, you know. But that's what it comes down to. What are your intentions with anything in life? You're gonna get it. You're gonna get back what you put out into the universe, you know. So do you have any social media or anything you would like our listeners to know about if they want to contact you or they want to purchase your book? Any links or anything?
Yeah. Well, my book is available on Amazon. Apocalypse Chow, a remix of Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. It's that's the subtitle. It's out there. I'm on Facebook, David JW. I'm pretty easy to track down. My full name is David Julian Whiteman. I like using
That sounds more like an author's name, Julian Whiteman.
Thank you. Thank
like you need a quill pen.
Yeah.
You gotta get one of those old style.
So I'm pretty easy to find.
Okay.
And like I feel really grateful. I've got to say, by the time I published the book, it was something where I was like, this time last year I was incarcerated, and now I'm publishing. I'm back, and I'm out. I'm survived. I'm thriving. I've published this book, and so like when we were talking a second ago, manifesting. It's like these are like the times, like those times of crisis are those times when it's most important to like sort of try to manifest your own destiny, if I can use that crazy phrase, but just to be like, no, I'm going to survive this. I'm going to pull through. I'm going to make it, I'll be tempered by this, stronger, and come out on the other side of it. And I think that attitude, that approach is something that I think everyone can take on, really. I mean, it's determination. There's a lot of, like, I'm not a believer. I'm not a believer in like, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. So, like someone who's poor, all they need to do is pull up their bootstraps. It's like, well, what if they don't have boots, right? I mean, we actually have a real situation in cities like Ottawa where people don't have winter boots. Yeah. They don't have winter coats, right?
I saw it firsthand when we were going down and handing out boots and coats to people. Yeah.
Yeah. I was really impressed by that. I sent you a donation, but I think it was like somehow I sent it after you did it. Anyway,
that's okay.
Whatever. I was really super impressed by that. I thought, like, good on you. Like, I think it has to be systematic. Like, so if we're giving, like, I think the total number is $27 billion of subsidies in one form or another by the federal and provincial governments that get paid out. Some of it is to like I think it's 3 or 4 billion that gets paid to the oil industry. Like, why are we giving the oil industry billions of dollars of subsidies?
Meanwhile, people are starving and freezing.
Yeah, that's crazy, right?
Yeah.
So like there's all of these examples of just how mental the situation is, and seeing firsthand what it's like to live in what Donald Trump had called a shithole country, like living in sub-Saharan Africa, experiencing, and people can experience this in all sorts of other places, or they can experience this by going on reserve in places in Canada, right? I mean, there are places that are third world countries, the third world conditions right here in Canada. It's a race to the bottom as far as the oligarchs are concerned, as far as the corporations are concerned. I mean, they, survival of their survival is paramount. But for the rest of us, it's sort of like, actually we have more in common with migrants. We have more in common with transgender people. We have more in common with the unemployed. We have more in common with welfare moms. Like we need to unite. We are like we're the majority, and if we're like scattered and separated by haters like Doug Ford, then we're gonna just keep fighting each other and this race to the bottom.
Yeah, we just can't feel divided. We all have more in common, I think, than we're taught to believe. So we just gotta learn to love one another, and just stop hating all the time. Because propaganda tends to mess with people's minds, I find, and brainwash them. They're thinking that
really well.
Yeah, everyone else is the enemy, but the government, So, you said your book is on Amazon. If people want to go purchase it.
Okay. Yeah, and it's what used to be Create Space. Now they've shifted it to Kindle Direct Publishing, which I recommend actually for you. I don't know. Do you still publish your books on Lulu?
I'm actually doing it through Kindle Direct right now. My only issue is I'm trying to get my paperback on Amazon. So I have an ebook on Amazon right now, but I'm just trying to get all my paperbacks there. So it's just trying to get the formatting right and all that. So that's the only thing holding me back right now with that. But,
I mean, it is the man, so to speak. But I mean, in terms of self-publishing, and I'll say this to the audience or anyone, it's like you want to publish a book, it's doable. Not going to make you millions, that's for sure. I mean, I don't know how long it's going to take me to recoup the money I spent on my book, in terms of getting it professionally sorted and like having it out there into the universe, so to speak. Yeah. But it's not all about money.
No, it's not. It's about the message. You're the storyteller, right?
Yeah. And there's a certain satisfaction in it, and these are sort of milestones of life. I mean, one of the things that I'm a big believer in is we have a tendency of being told that we have to get on the treadmill. Everyone's doing it. Everyone's save, work. Never mind the fact that average household debt is 170%. I mean, holy crap! The average Canadian household owes $1.70 on every dollar they make. That is so frightening. It's not even funny.
Yeah,
but there are different ways to live. And I mean, I don't think we should all have to jump onto into the rat race. There are other ways to live. There are other ways to exist, and I'm a big believer in sort of kind of swimming against the tide.
You're a rebel, a rebel soul.
Yeah, I don't know how else to be.
That's good. Never change.
I've been like this since I was a kid, I don't know how else to be. I've sort of been a bit of an alien.
Good. Welcome to the club, David.
Absolutely. And I'm jazzed that actually Facebook reminded you. It reminded me as well that we did that tattoo all those years ago.
Yes. That was actually last week.
I hadn't forgot that. Yeah, I hadn't forgot that.
So that's good time.
You got a lot more work done since then.
Yeah, I've done most of it myself since then. Over 200.
Yeah. Are you
over
still
200.
tattooing?
Yes, I am. I'm at Fresh Ink Bridalwood right now out in Canada.
Oh, right on. Congratulations.
Thank you. Awesome. So, David, I guess I will be letting you go for the night. I just need to know if there's any other information you want the listeners to know about in regards to any upcoming events or projects you got going on. I'm lining up to do Naked Boys Reading. If people haven't heard of that, it is a really, really unique event that is happening here in Ottawa on a regular basis. It is, I think it's usually the third Monday of the month. Happens at Live on Elgin. I'm taking part in a version of that's happening at Swizzles in the near future. It's a very unusual event. People are actually even coming up from the States to check it out. I'm due to do a book launch at some point soon. I was very privileged to have David Lone, who is a former restaurateur here in Ottawa. He ran Zen Kitchen for a long time on Somerset. He did the audio version of Apocalypse Chow, which is available on audible.com. And I'm so grateful to David for doing that. And he and I are organizing a book launch
although I don't have a date just yet.
That's okay.
Typical flying by the seat of my pants.
Once you have it, let me know, and I'm just gonna like tell people about it on the radio for you.
And I have a copy of the book for you, so
Oh,
I got to
no
get
way.
it to you somehow. Figure that out.
Awesome. Looking forward to that. All right. Well, I hope you enjoy the rest of your night, and thanks for doing this interview. So last minute, basically. And take care of yourself, and let me know what's going on when you get more information about the book, and I'll make sure all of our listeners know about it.
Thank you so much, Kanaska. Congratulations. This show is awesome, and I know you have loyal listeners, and well done. I'm so impressed.
Thanks, David. Have a great night.
Thank you. Thanks, you too.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
You're tuned to The Witching Hours on CKCU 93.1 FM in Ottawa. I'm your host, Kanaska Carter. Don't go anywhere, folks. We've got a great show coming up for you tonight.